Most fences don't fail on day one. They fail quietly. A few years later, it starts small. A board warps. A post leans just enough to notice. The bottoms stay damp too long. And then one section starts twisting while another slowly pulls loose. What was supposed to be a clean, simple fix turns into something you're dealing with again. Or people go the other direction and chase speed. That's where bamboo gets people. Because bamboo always sounds good at the beginning. Fast screen, nice movement, green wall. Then it starts showing you what fast really means when the wrong plant decides your property line is just a suggestion. In Virginia, running bamboo became enough of a real-world nuisance that state law now allows local ordinances requiring containment and prohibiting it from spreading onto adjoining property or public rights-of-way. That's not garden center gossip. That's what happens when a planting choice turns into a neighborhood problem. And the thing that gets me is, none of this is a new human problem. People wanted privacy before fence companies. They wanted windbreaks before treated lumber. They wanted boundaries before the whole answer to every outdoor problem became, go buy something boxed, bagged, stacked, and loaded into the back of a truck. They solved it with plants. Not every old plant deserves to be revived, and not every hedge from the past belongs in a modern yard. But some of those old living barriers still make so much sense that once you look at them with clear eyes, it becomes hard not to notice how much practical knowledge got pushed aside. The first one I'd put in that category is Thuja Green Giant. Now this one is not dramatic. It doesn't walk in with a great frontier legend attached to it. It's not thorny, not strange, not romantic. But sometimes the most useful plant in the yard is the one that does not try to impress you with personality. It just keeps showing up and doing the work. NC State says Green Giant can grow about 3 to 4 feet per year under good conditions, with a dense columnar pyramidal habit, and it can mature around 40 to 60 feet tall and 12 to 18 feet wide. That combination is exactly why it keeps ending up in real privacy conversations instead of just fantasy ones. And that's what I like about it. It behaves like a plant that understands the job. You plant it for privacy, and it actually leans toward privacy. You brush past a lot of fast-growing trees, and sooner or later you discover the hidden claws. Brittle wood, odd spread, ugly winter look. Roots where you do not want them. Disease pressure you were never told about. Green Giant is not flawless, nothing is, but it gives you a much cleaner bargain than most people realize. Tall enough to matter, dense enough to matter, evergreen, which matters a lot more than people think once December arrives and all those leafy summer screens stop pretending. NC State also notes a lifespan in the 40 to 60 year range, which is another reason it feels like more than a quick fix. It has some staying power in it. The only thing I would slow people down on is spacing and scale, because this is where homeowners talk themselves into trouble. They fall in love with the young plant and forget the mature one exists. Then, 5 or 6 years later, they've got something pressing too close to the drive, the walkway, or the side of the house, and now they're pruning in panic. Green Giant is a real screen for real space. It is not a bandage for a strip of dirt that was undersized from the start, but when the space is there, this is one of the cleanest forgotten truths in the whole privacy conversation. The best answer is not always the weirdest answer. Sometimes it's the plant that quietly beats the modern default because it asks for less drama over time. Now, once the ground gets wet, the conversation changes. A lot of plants look promising right up until the soil stays heavy. That's when they sulk, sit still, yellow out, or make you feel like you planted money into a problem spot just to watch it hesitate. But there's another kind of plant that looks at wet ground and almost seems to wake up. That's where willow starts to make people feel like they've stumbled onto an old trick. And in a way, they have. Iowa State says willows are easily propagated by hardwood cuttings, and they root quite easily. That sounds like a small detail until you really picture what it means in practice. It means a fence line can grow out of itself. It means one successful row can become the start of another. It means the plant is doing part of the multiplying for you instead of asking you to keep pulling your wallet back out every time you want to extend the screen another 20 feet. That is exactly the kind of old gardening intelligence that used to make more sense than buying your way through every inch of a boundary. And willow has a kind of energy to it that People either love immediately or they don't trust enough. I love it, in the right place. Because if you've got a wet back edge, a low spot, a ditch line, or a place where the soil holds moisture and ordinary privacy plants just never really settle in, willow starts to feel almost unfair. It grows with purpose. It fills with purpose. It doesn't look like it's negotiating with the site. It looks like it belongs there. That matters. A lot of bad privacy planting comes from forcing a plant to play a role it never really wanted. Willow is one of those cases where the land gives you a clue, and the smart move is to listen. But this is also where a seasoned voice has to be more useful than an enthusiastic one. Because willow is not something I'd throw around like a universal miracle. Water-seeking trees are a different animal. University of Minnesota guidance for septic landscaping says poplar, birch, beech, walnut, maple, willow, linden, and elm should be planted at least 50 feet from the soil treatment area. And Clemson also warns that willows and poplars have very aggressive root systems around drain fields. That's the real story. Out on open ground, on a damp edge, on a bigger property where the roots have room to be what they are, willow can be a fantastic screen. Too close to septic or buried infrastructure, and that same strength becomes the reason you regret it. That leads naturally to hybrid poplar, which lives in that same world of fast answers, but with a slightly different feel to it. Hybrid poplar is not subtle. It does not pretend to be a quaint little landscape accent. It is a serious move when what you need is quick height, quick cover, and a planting that starts changing the feel of a property faster than slower trees ever could. University of Minnesota's Innovatree material describes hybrid poplar as a tree that quickly produces shade and privacy, recommends it for privacy screens and windbreaks, and says it should be spaced 8 to 16 feet apart for screening while being kept at least 25 feet from foundations or septic systems and away from roadways and power lines. That one set of recommendations tells you nearly everything important about this plant. It is useful, it is fast, and it needs room from anything you don't want it complicating later. This is the kind of tree I'd think about for a long back boundary, a larger lot, a windy edge, or one of those properties where the problem isn't just, I want a prettier border. The problem is height, exposure, sightline. Maybe somebody built up behind you. Maybe a road got busier. Maybe the yard used to feel private until the surrounding land changed. Hybrid poplar can answer that kind of shift in a way a lot of prettier shrubs simply cannot. And on a bigger site, that speed is not just convenient. It changes how quickly a place starts feeling settled again. University of Minnesota's newer materials also describe select hybrid poplar types growing up to 10 feet per year under ideal conditions, which tells you why people keep coming back to them when fast screening is the real need. The trade, of course, is that trees like this are not for careless planting. That's really the thread running through all the good old solutions. They are not careless, they are not random. They're powerful because they fit the job. Planting hybrid poplar on a cramped suburban strip and then acting surprised when it behaves like a large, vigorous tree is not the plant's failure. That's a judgment failure. Put it where a fast land-shaping tree actually makes sense, and now it starts looking a whole lot smarter than pouring money into a fence that still won't give you the same height 2 years from now. Then there's hawthorn, and this is where the whole conversation takes on more age. Because hawthorn doesn't just screen a space, it gives the boundary a different kind of character. Oregon State's Hedgerow Guide notes that hedgerows originated in medieval Europe and describes the Old English practice of planting hawthorn cuttings, letting them grow, then bending and training them to fill gaps and create a living fence. NC State also notes that hawthorn species can be pruned and used as a barrier or hedge, and that thorny species are suitable for screening or security. That is the kind of plant history I love, because it is not decorative history, it's practical memory, and you can still feel why it worked. A good, thorny hedge changes behavior. It doesn't just block the eye, it discourages movement, it builds thickness, it creates that sense that the boundary is not flimsy and temporary but alive and intentional. Hawthorn also has more life in it than people who only think in terms of privacy usually notice. Many species offer spring bloom, dense branching, wildlife value, and a structure that still has presence after leaf drop. It feels like a barrier with some memory in it. Not sterile, not dead flat. Not the same anonymous wall every other backyard on the block bought from the same place. And the reason I'd still put hawthorn in the trust first group is because it keeps 1 foot in utility and 1 foot in meaning. That combination matters. Some plants are all function and no feeling. Others are all charm until winter, or all beauty until the maintenance catches up with you. Hawthorn sits in a richer middle ground. But the smart version of this is not go copy an English hedge exactly. The smart version is to take the old principle seriously and then choose the right hawthorn species for your own region and use. That's what experienced gardeners do. They inherit the idea without blindly inheriting the mistake. And then there's Osage orange. This is the one that makes the whole subject feel bigger than landscaping. Because Osage orange is not just a plant people happen to use. It helped shape an entire way of thinking about what a boundary could be. Purdue says Osage orange made such an effective hedge because the stems have stout thorns and produce dense sprout colonies when cut back or pruned, creating the old description, horse high, bull strong, and pig tight. Purdue also notes how durable and rot-resistant the wood is, which helps explain why it stayed valuable, not only as a hedge but as post material too. That is a serious plant. It was serious then and it's serious now, and I think that seriousness is part of why the plant still has such a grip on people's imagination. Osage orange does not feel ornamental. It feels purposeful. Rural edges, bigger acreage, tougher perimeters. Those are the places where it still starts making real sense. Not because it is trendy, not because it is cute, but because it was bred by necessity into the memory of the land. The old farmers who trusted a plant like this were not trying to make a nice content moment. They were solving a hard problem with what actually held up. That difference still matters. Now, I would not hand Osage orange to every homeowner like it's some universal suburban fix. That would be lazy advice. Thorns are real. Scale is real. The setting matters. But when the setting fits, this is one of the strongest examples in the whole living fence conversation of an old answer that never stopped being intelligent. People just stopped looking in that direction because the modern habit is to buy boundaries instead of grow them. And maybe that's the part I keep coming back to. The old wisdom was not old because it was sentimental, and it lasted because it observed things properly. Wet ground wants one answer. Broad open land wants another. A true evergreen privacy wall is not the same thing as a thorn barrier. A fast screen is not the same thing as a long-haul hedge. Once you start seeing those differences, the whole subject gets more interesting. It stops being, what's the fastest plant? And becomes, what kind of boundary are you really trying to grow? That's a much smarter question. So, if I were standing in the yard with somebody looking across the line and trying to choose with a clear head, these are the ones I'd lean toward first. Thuja green giant when you want the cleanest evergreen answer and you've got real room for it. Willow when the ground stays wet and you can keep it well away from septic and buried infrastructure. And hybrid poplar when fast height is the actual problem and the site is large enough to handle a vigorous tree honestly. Hawthorn when you want a true living hedge with density, thorn, and old world backbone. Osage orange when the line needs toughness and the property can actually use it. Those are not the flashiest names in the conversation. They are the ones I trust sooner. Now, there are still some other plants that always show up when people start talking about living fences. Some are outrageously fast, some are beautiful. Some have great stories attached to them, and a few really can work. But that is where the trade-offs start getting sharper, and that is where a lot of people get seduced by the promise and miss the catch. And if you'd like to hear more about the rest of these, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. I'll cover those in the next video because some of them are worth a serious look. You just don't want to walk into them blind.